In a world of geopolitical fragmentation and technological disruption, the central constraint on India is no longer just money or policy. It is state capacity. Just let that statement sink in for a second. We spend, so much of our prep time obsessing over the fiscal deficit or the repo rate, the finer points of latest trade deal. But the Economic Survey 2025-26, it opens this section, part 2 of chapter 16, with this absolute hammer of a thesis.
It really is.
And it poses a question that I think haunts every serious student of Indian governance and, well, certainly every aspirant hoping to join that very structure. Why does a country with such strong macroeconomic fundamentals, the numbers look great on paper, still struggle sometimes to simply get things done on the ground? Welcome back to another deep dive on Simplified UPSC by PPP. This is the place where we don't just skim the headlines. We really try to decode the matrix of the syllabus to get you those extra marks. I'm your host, ready to deconstruct this, and sitting across from me is the brain behind the operation.
Good to be here. And you're right, to start with that quote, it's the anchor for this entire discussion. It fundamentally changes the lens through which we have to view development in India today.
Okay, so before we dive into this massive topic, and it is massive, I have a crucial mandate for you listening right now. We put an immense amount of work, really, into these deep dives, breaking down these complex government documents so you don't have to tear your hair out.
And they are dense.
They are. So if you find value in this, I am humbly asking you, please hit that subscribe button. And if you're in a position to, please consider joining our paid membership on YouTube. It literally keeps the lights on and supports the creation of this kind of high utility content.
Absolutely. The support from the community is, it's what allows us to go this deep. It takes a lot of time to connect these dots, and your support, well, it buys us that time.
And a huge shout out to our existing members. You guys are the absolute backbone of this channel. Please like this episode, drop your valuable comments below. The algorithm loves it, and frankly, so do we.
Right. And for everyone asking about the materials, we always get this question. The free notes and the practice PYQs, the previous year questions for this session are already up on our Telegram channel. The link is in the description.
And this is important. If you want the premium experience, the premium notes, extra PYQs, and the model mains answers, which are, let's be honest, absolute gold for your answer writing prep.
They really are. We spend a lot of time on those.
Those are available exclusively on our Discord channel.
Right.
And that's for our legend YouTube members.
Yeah.
Join the membership. Become a legend. Get on the Discord. You won't regret it. Okay, business aside, let's get to it. What is our mission today?
Okay. Today is a full comprehensive analysis of Chapter 16, Part 2 of the Economic Survey 2025-26. The title of the chapter is Building Strategic Resilience and Strategic Indispensability.
That sounds heavy. Indispensability is a very big word.
It is heavy, but it's critical for where India wants to go. We're covering pages 653 to 680. And just to be clear, we are not doing summaries today.
No shortcuts.
No shortcuts. We are not skipping the hard parts. We are analyzing the triad that the survey identifies as the key to this whole thing: the state, the private sector, and the citizens.
And to keep us grounded, to make this useful for you, we're going to strictly link this to PYQs. Because if it doesn't help you write a better answer in your GS2 or your GS3 paper, then, well, we're not doing our job correctly.
That's the plan. So let's begin.
All right. Segment 1. Defining the binding constraint. The survey kicks off on page 653. It notes that India, right now in the second half of the 2020s, has arguably the strongest fundamentals we've seen in decades. But then it just pivots completely. It says the challenge is shifted.
Right. And this is the core argument. The challenge is no longer just macroeconomic management. For a very long time, India's primary problem was stability. Inflation, currency volatility, runaway deficits. Think back to the taper tantrum in 2013, or of course the 1991 crisis.
Right, the classic balance of payments crisis.
Exactly. The survey argues we've largely stabilized that. We have the Forex reserves. Inflation is more or less anchored. The new bottleneck, the real binding constraint on our growth, is state capacity.
Okay, so we hear this term, state capacity, thrown around a lot in editorials and discussions, but can you define that for us in the context of this survey? Because it can sound like, vague jargon. Does it just mean we need to hire more government employees?
No, not exactly. It's much more nuanced than that. The survey actually references a paper by Somanathan and Aversion from 2022 to ground this definition, and they define state capacity very simply but very powerfully as the government's ability to get the right things done.
Get the right things done. That sounds simple, but I'm guessing it's incredibly loaded.
Highly loaded, because it distinguishes between intent and execution. It's not about intent. Every government wants to do good things. It's not even really about resources anymore, which is a huge shift. We have significant tax buoyancy.
So we have the money.
We have the money. It's about execution. It's about the ability to design a policy, a really good policy, and then actually deliver it on the ground without it getting stuck in just a quagmire of inefficiency or endless legal hurdles. It's the difference between announcing a new highway on a PowerPoint slide and actually laying the asphalt on time and on budget.
So, okay, if we have the money and we have the intent, why does it get stuck? The survey gets into this idea of incentive structures.
This is crucial. This is the heart of the problem. The survey argues that constraints are not external, they're internal. They are built into the very incentives of the people who run the institutions. And the biggest one they highlight is bureaucratic risk aversion.
Ah, the famous policy paralysis, the don't touch the file syndrome we hear so much about.
Exactly. But we need to look at why it happens. It's not just laziness, which is the easy answer. The survey digs deeper. It analyzes the fear of post facto audits.
Post facto. So audits happening years after the decision was made.
Precisely. Imagine you are a bureaucrat, a joint secretary. You have to make a decision under immense uncertainty. Say, you're allocating a tender for a new port, or you're procuring vaccines during a pandemic. If you take a calculated risk and it pays off spectacularly, what do you get?
Your salary. Maybe a pat on the back.
Your salary. There's no massive bonus. But if you take that same risk with the same honest intent and it fails, which some risks inevitably do, you might face a CBI inquiry, a CBC notice, or a CAG audit 5-10 years down the line when the context is completely forgotten.
So the incentive is to do absolutely nothing. Because doing nothing is safe. No decision means no error.
You've nailed it. The asymmetry of the payoff is the problem. It's all downside, no upside. And this is where the survey introduces a key concept. It's in box 66014 called the Entrepreneurial State. It argues that for India to become a developed nation, the state must take risks. We cannot build a high-growth economy by playing it safe and only doing things that have a 0% chance of failure.
But doesn't risk in government sound, well, dangerous? I mean, we don't want them gambling with taxpayer money.
And that's the nuance the survey makes. And it's a vital one, by the way, for your GS4 ethics paper. We have to learn to distinguish between malified intent, which is corruption, taking bribes, nepotism that should be punished severely, and a genuine business risk that simply didn't work out. If we treat every honest error of judgment as a crime, no officer will ever sign a difficult file again. Innovation, by definition, requires the possibility of failure.
The text actually uses the phrase vexatious prosecution. It says honest officials need protection.
Yes, and it's a call for a legal framework that codifies this protection. If a decision was made in good faith, based on the information available at the time, and it fails, that is the cost of doing business for a developing country. It is not a crime. Otherwise, we remain stuck in what the survey calls compliance mode, just ticking boxes, following the rule book to cover our backs, rather than problem-solving mode.
This connects to something really interesting in box X6.3 about culture. Mobilizing culture for scale.
Yeah.
I have to say, this felt very sociological for an economic survey.
It is, and it's fascinating because it's so true to the Indian context. The survey points out that trust in India is incredibly high within what it calls insider networks, so families, castes, close-knit communities. But that trust is traditionally very low when you're dealing with outsiders.
So I'll trust my cousin implicitly with a business deal, but I won't trust a vendor from another city unless I have a connection. Someone who knows them.
Exactly. And you can see how that fundamentally limits the scale of the economy. If you only do business with people you know personally, you can't grow. You can't build a global supply chain on cousin trust. So the survey argues that state capacity isn't about destroying culture, but about making those kinship constraints less binding.
How does it do that?
By creating fair and predictable institutions. When the system is fair, when contracts are enforced, when permissions are granted on merit, you don't need a connection. You don't need a source in the ministry to get your work done. You trust the system itself.
That's a powerful way to look at it. The state essentially replaces the cousin as the guarantor of trust in a transaction.
That's a fantastic way to put it. The institution becomes the intermediary of trust, allowing the economy to scale.
Okay, let's link this directly to the exam. This feels like prime GS2 and GS4 territory.
It's a direct hit. Take a look at 2016 GS2, question 10, the question asked. In the Indian governance system, the role of non-state actors has been only marginal. Discuss.
Okay, a classic question. How does this chapter help us answer that in a more sophisticated way?
Well, you have to ask why their role is marginal. It's not for lack of trying. For non-state actors, so we're talking about NGOs, private firms, civil society to function effectively, they need a capable state to provide the basic framework. If the state itself is paralyzed by risk aversion, if getting a simple permit takes 2 years, non-state actors can't plug in. They get stuck in the exact same red tape.
So you would argue that state capacity is the fundamental prerequisite for effective non-state participation.
Precisely. Without a functioning backbone, the limbs can't move. You can't have a vibrant civil society if the state can't even register them efficiently and fairly.
And there was another one from that same year, 2016, right?
Yes, GS2 question 13. Has the Indian governmental system responded adequately to the demands of liberalization, privatization, and globalization?
Another classic.
A total classic. And the survey gives you a fresh 2026 perspective to update your old notes. The answer is, we responded adequately on policy. That was the liberalization part in 1991. But we lagged on building capacity. We changed the laws, but we didn't fundamentally change the bureaucratic incentive structure.
So the laws are liberalized, but the mindset is still stuck in the pre-91 era.
That's your conclusion for that answer right there. We need to move from a culture of compliance, just following old rules, to a culture of capability, which means actually delivering results in a globalized world. The software hasn't caught up with the hardware update.
That is brilliant. That mindset shift is the absolute key. Okay, let's unpack segment 2. The survey moves from this abstract idea of the state to the people within it. State capability as a human system.
Yes, and it starts with a beautiful quote from the Rig Veda, Mandala 10. Move together, speak together. It's a reminder that institutions are, at the end of the day, just people. We talk about the ministry deciding something, but in reality it's a joint secretary or a director in a room making a call.
And this is where they push the idea of a transition from rule-based to role-based governance.
Right. And this phrase gets thrown around a lot, especially in the context of Mission Karmayogi, so it's important you understand what it actually means in practice.
Break it down to us.
Okay. Rule-based means I am a servant of the rule book. If the rule says you must submit Form A, I will demand Form A, even if the situation clearly doesn't require it, or if Form A is hopelessly outdated. I am essentially a robot programmed by the rulebook.
Okay.
Role-based means I understand my purpose. My role is not just to check forms. My role is to help a citizen start a business or to solve a public health problem. This requires judgment, it requires ethical reasoning, and it requires empathy.
The survey says here it's not just about automation or AI.
No, and that's a very important distinction to make. AI can process form much faster than a human. But only a human can exercise judgment in a complex, ambiguous situation. Let me give you an example. A poor, elderly woman comes for her ration, but her fingerprints don't match because her hands are worn from a lifetime of labor. A rule-based system, an algorithm, just rejects her. End of story.
Right. Computer says no.
Computer says no. But a role-based human officer who understands their role is to prevent starvation finds another way to verify her identity. That's the difference. And that's what Mission Karmayogi is trying to build through continuous learning and competency mapping to train officers to think like problem solvers, not just gatekeepers.
There's also a mention here of the state support mission in box 16.6. This seems to be getting at the federalism angle.
Absolutely crucial for any GS2 federalism question. The State Support Mission, or SSM, is the center's mechanism for helping the states build their own capacity. The stated goal is helping every state become a developed state as part of the Viksit Bharat at 2047 vision.
Is this just about giving them more money? Like a new centrally sponsored scheme?
No, and that's the key shift here. It's not primarily about financial transfers. It's about institutional strengthening. It's about cross-state learning. For example, if Odisha has developed a world-class system for disaster management, which they have, how does the SSM help a state like, say, Bihar learn from that and adapt that mechanism?
So it's about transferring knowledge, not just funds.
Exactly. It's cooperative federalism in practice. It's about creating platforms for knowledge transfer between states, with the center acting as a facilitator.
Okay, let's check the PYQ linkage on this.
Look at 2016 GS2, question 11. It says, effectiveness of the government system at various levels and people's participation in the governance system are interdependent.
Interdependent, that's the key word there.
That's the whole game. And the survey reinforces this directly. You can't have an effective government system at various levels, center, state, panchaya, if the people inside that system, the human resource, are stuck in old rule-based mentalities. The SSM and Mission Karmayogi are the tools to fix that human system. Because if the officer at the panchayat level is completely risk-averse, then the Gram Sabha's participation is ultimately meaningless because nothing they decide will ever get executed.
So true. The best ideas die at the desk of a fearful official.
Precisely.
Okay, moving on to segment 3. This is one of my favorite parts of the chapter because it's so relevant today. It deals with the regulatory state. The survey calls regulators the fourth branch of government.
It's a very significant designation, and it's accurate. Think about bodies like SEBI, Triad, the Competition Commission of India, CERC. They are not the courts, they are not parliament, and they are not exactly the executive ministry, but they exercise powers that look like all three.
Can you explain that? How do they do all three?
Well, they write regulations, like framing rules for telecom spectrum auctions. That's a legislative power. They enforce those rules and conduct investigations. That's an executive power. And they adjudicate disputes between parties, imposing penalties. That's a judicial power. They are a powerhouse of governance.
That sounds like an enormous amount of power concentrated in one, often unelected body.
It is, and that's the tension the survey highlights. On the one hand, we need them to be independent so they aren't bullied by politicians or, worse, captured by the very industries they're supposed to be regulating.
Right.
But on the other hand, we need them to be accountable so they don't become a state within a state operating without any democratic oversight.
State within a state. That is a very strong phrase.
It implies a lack of answerability. If a regulator makes a rule that inadvertently destroys an entire industry, who are they accountable to? And this is where the survey, in box 6.7, discusses regulatory capacity as institutional design.
So what are the key reforms it proposes to strike this balance between independence and accountability?
Two big ones that you should definitely mention in your answers. First, timelines. This is massive. The survey argues that economic laws must have specific mandated timelines for decisions.
The time value of money. I see that mentioned here.
Exactly. If a regulator sits on an approval for a merger for 2 years, the deal might die. The market moves on, capital finds another home. The survey makes a radical suggestion. Delaying a decision beyond the mandated timeline should be treated with the same severity as obstructing a public servant.
Wow. So inaction itself becomes a punishable offense.
It has to be. In a fast-moving global economy, time is capital. If the regulator steals your time through indecision, they are effectively stealing your capital. The second big reform is recruitment. Right now, let's be honest, many regulatory posts are seen as comfortable parking spots for retired bureaucrats.
The post-retirement posting syndrome. We see it all the time in the news.
And the survey argues that has to change. We need younger experts who want to build a career in regulation. We need domain specialists who deeply understand complex markets like derivatives, or spectrum allocation, or AI governance, or crypto. You can't regulate the complexities of AI with a generalist mindset formed in the 1980s.
This connects so directly to exam questions about quasi-judicial bodies.
It's a perfect fit for 2016 GS2 Question 8, which asks, what is a quasi-judicial body? Explain with the help of concrete examples.
Right. And usually students will just list SEBI, NGT, and maybe explain their functions and move on.
But if you want the high marks, you use the survey's analysis. You explain that while they are quasi-judicial, the current challenge is balancing their independence with democratic accountability. You mention the need for parliamentary review of their regulations. You discuss the staffing and recruitment issues the survey raises. You add that layer of contemporary analysis.
And what about the 2025 GS2 question 2, about administrative tribunals versus courts?
Another great link. The survey argues for what it calls responsible regulation. This implies that these tribunals and regulatory bodies need to be more than just slower, less formal versions of courts. Their entire purpose, their reason for existing, is to provide specific expertise and, crucially, speed. If they become as slow and bogged down in procedure as the traditional judiciary, they have failed their mandate. They must be agile.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's shift gears now to the second pillar of this triad. We've talked a lot about the state. Now let's talk about the private corporate sector. Segment 4.
This is where the survey gets, let's say, quite spicy. It turns the mirror on India Inc.
It says the private sector isn't just a profit-making machine. It's a structural participant in state capacity, but then drops the hammer with this phrase, negotiated shelter.
Negotiated shelter. It's a very polite, official way of saying cronyism or protectionism. The survey delivers a sharp critique of Indian firms for often running to the government to ask for higher tariffs, import bans, or special subsidies. basically seeking shelter from competition rather than competing on pure efficiency and innovation.
So, to put it simply, instead of building a better mobile phone, they asked the government to tax the imported phone so the local one looks cheaper by comparison.
That's the essence of it. They lobby for protection rather than investing in productivity. And the survey's message is blunt. Stop it. If you want India to be a global power, Indian companies have to compete globally. And it uses some powerful international precedents in box 6.8 to make this point.
Japan and South Korea. I see them mentioned.
The Keiretsu in Japan and the Chaebols in South Korea. Now, these were massive, powerful industrial conglomerates, and let's be clear, they were ruthless about making a profit, but, and this is the absolute key, they also viewed the firm as a national institution.
Explain that concept. What does that mean in practice?
It means their corporate strategy was fundamentally aligned with the nation's strategic goals. When Japan's national goal was to dominate consumer electronics, companies like Sony and Toshiba didn't just run to the government asking for protection. They invested insane amounts of money in R&D to make the best, most innovative products in the world. They pursued what was called export discipline.
Export discipline.
The idea was simple. If you can't sell your product in the highly competitive markets of America or Europe, you just aren't good enough. You don't deserve to survive.
So they didn't hide behind a high tariff wall at home.
They used the domestic market as a training ground, as a launch pad, not as a comfortable bunker to hide in. And this survey is essentially asking India Inc. to adopt this mindset. It's a call for long-term investment in R&D, in skilling your workforce, in building world-class quality.
This is where that phrase from the chapter title comes in. Strategic indispensability.
Exactly. Don't just be a cheap manufacturer. Become indispensable to the global supply chain. Make something the world cannot live without. The way TSMC in Taiwan is indispensable for advanced semiconductors, or how certain German Mittelstand companies are indispensable for high-end industrial machinery. If you are indispensable, you have true strategic resilience.
And there's this line I underlined. It's brilliant. Productive firms act as a forcing mechanism for higher state capacity.
I love that logic. It's a feedback loop. If a firm is highly efficient and trying to compete on a global scale, it will demand better roads from the government. It will demand faster customs clearance at the ports. It will demand 247 electricity. It puts pressure on the state to shape up and improve its own capacity.
Whereas if a firm is just happy selling low-quality goods behind a tariff wall, it doesn't really care if the port is slow because they're not exporting much anyway.
Precisely. It creates a virtuous cycle. A high-performing private sector demands and helps create a high-performing state.
Let's link this to GS3. This is prime material.
Oh, absolutely. Think about 2013 GS3, question 1. It was about corporate social responsibility, CSR, and the new companies bill.
Right, the mandatory 2% profit rule.
Yes, but the survey allows you to take that answer a step further. It suggests that real CSR isn't just about writing a check for a charity or building a few toilets to meet a quota. It's about your core business strategy being aligned with the national interest. Are you investing in cutting-edge R&D? Are you upskilling thousands of young Indians? That is the ultimate CSR. Building capabilities within the nation is the real social responsibility, not just philanthropy.
And what about 2013 GS3, question 7, impact of liberalization on Indian companies?
That question is basically asking, are they competing effectively? The survey suggests the answer is mix. Some are, absolutely, but far too many are still relying on that negotiated shelter. So to fully answer that question today, you would argue that the next phase of liberalization requires moving from simple protectionism to a focus on strategic indispensability. You would use the survey's critique that liberalization hasn't fully cured the old license Raj mindset in the private sector. They've just replaced it with a demand for a protection Raj.
Wow, that is a powerful line. Okay, segment 5. We've done the state, we've done the private sector. Now for the most difficult one of all, the citizens.
Us. This is, I think, the most philosophical and perhaps the most challenging part of the chapter, pages 676 to 680. And the core concept is this. Capability is co-produced.
To produce, what does that mean?
It means the state can't do it alone. Think about it this way. The state can build a world-class 8-lane expressway. But if citizens drive on the wrong side of the road, if they stop to have picnics on it, the traffic is still a mess. The state can build a modern hospital. But if citizens are violent towards the staff or try to steal the equipment, the health system will still fail.
So the state provides the hardware, but the citizens provide the software of norms and behavior.
Beautifully put. That's exactly it. And if we, as citizens, don't follow the basic rules, traffic laws, paying our taxes honestly, basic sanitation, then the state has to spend all its energy and resources simply policing us.
Instead of spending that energy on development.
Exactly. Instead of building new schools, it's hiring more police. If everyone followed traffic rules voluntarily, the traffic police could focus on optimizing traffic flow with smart signals rather than just standing at a corner catching violators. The survey refers to a fascinating concept here called gross domestic behavior, which was mentioned in an earlier chapter.
Gross domestic behavior. That's a brilliant term. It's like, what is the GDP of our collective civic sense?
That's a great way to think about it. A high GDP means low transaction cost for everyone. A low GDP means high friction, high costs, and a weaker state. And this leads the survey to touch upon a very sensitive topic: freebies.
Right. It's touching the third rail of Indian politics there.
It does, but it does so from a very logical economic perspective. It argues that freebies are not paid by anybody in the present. The cost doesn't just disappear into thin air, it is put onto a future generation.
There's a quote here that is just haunting. No one sees the child who will one day pay the interest on today's promises.
That is a profound ethical statement. It's arguing that a citizen's demand for unsustainable freebies today is, in effect, a violation of their duty to the future generation. It represents a collective failure of what the survey calls delayed gratification.
Delayed gratification is like a marshmallow test, but for an entire country.
It is. Real sustainable growth requires patience. It requires saving, it requires investment, it requires the hard, slow work of building institutions. If we as a society panic and demand shortcuts, populism, quick fixes, we suffer from a phenomenon the survey calls hysteresis.
Hysteresis. That's a term from physics, isn't it? About memory and materials.
It is, but in economics and political science, it means the system forgets how to do the hard work. The institutional memory decays. If every time there's a problem, the government's solution is just to write a check and hand out a subsidy instead of fixing the root cause of the problem, then the institution itself loses the ability to fix root causes. We lose the muscle memory of reform.
This has got to connect to GS4 ethics and GS2 civil society.
Directly. Look at 2016 GS4 question 12, which was about public morality, and it's linked to things like the Corruption Perception Index. The survey draws a direct line between low public morality, things like non-compliance with basic rules, and low state capacity. You simply cannot have a first-world state with third-world civic behavior. The state ultimately mirrors the society it governs.
And what about 2025 GS2, question 8, on the role of civil society organizations?
Well, CSOs and citizens are the ones who define and uphold the norms of a society. If CSOs only ever talk about rights and entitlements and never speak about duties and responsibilities, they're contributing to the erosion of state capacity. The survey is calling for a renewed social contract where citizens see themselves as co-producers of governance. It's a dual responsibility.
Powerful stuff. All right, let's bring it home. Segment 6. We move from the theory to the practice. Deregulation, institutional capability in action. This is page 680 to the end.
This is the proof of the pudding section. The survey basically says, okay, we've talked a lot about risk aversion and building capacity. How do we actually test if it's working? And the answer is through deregulation.
And it talks about the Task Force on Compliance Reduction, which started in January 2025.
Right. The goal here is simple: to shift the administrative effort of the government from low-value policing to high-value problem-solving. Why should a small business have to file 50 different forms and get 20 different licenses just to stay open? It wastes their time, it wastes the officer's time, and it creates massive friction without adding any real value.
The data they present in Chart 6.7 is actually quite impressive.
It is. It says 36 states and UTs, 23 priority areas for deregulation, and as of January 2026, 76% of these reforms have been implemented.
76% is a very high strike rate for any government program in India.
It is, and the survey makes a key point. This isn't just about deleting old laws from a book. It is institutional reorientation. It forces every department to ask, why do we even need this rule? What purpose does it serve? It makes them justify their interventions, which is a powerful exercise in itself.
And they give specific case studies to show the impact: Tripura and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Let's look at Andaman, a very practical example. They introduced a completely online system for change in land use. In island economies, land is everything, and titles can be messy. By making this process online, transparent, and time-bound, they saw a sudden boom in tourism projects and, crucially, in credit flow from banks.
Because now the bank can be certain that the land title is clear and the project is approved.
Exactly. The risk for the lender is dramatically reduced. And look at Tripura. They held a big Rising Northeast Investors Summit 2025. And the survey says the success of that summit wasn't just good marketing. It happened because they had spent the previous year systematically deregulating and fixing the plumbing, making it genuinely attractive and easy for investors to come in.
They fixed the system before inviting the guests.
That's the way it has to be done.
There is a fantastic history lesson in box X6.9 that I found really illuminating. The comparison between the produce and protect era of electronics and the IT boom.
This is the classic A/B test of Indian economic history. It's a perfect case study. In the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, the Indian state tried to make electronics itself.
The PSU era, state-owned television and telephone companies.
Right. We had sky-high tariffs, state-owned factories, and total government control. And what was the result? We failed miserably. We completely missed the semiconductor revolution because the state tried to do everything itself and did it badly.
And then the IT sector happened in the 90s.
Software. The beautiful thing about software was that in the early days, the government didn't really understand it, so they mostly left it alone. They facilitated it. They set up software technology parks of India, the STPIs. They gave them dedicated satellite links for data transfer. But they didn't tell Infosys how to write code. They didn't tell Wipro which clients to pursue.
So when the state tried to be the controller, it failed. But when it acted as a catalyst, it succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams.
That is the single most important takeaway from this section. The role of the 21st century state is to be a catalyst. It should provide the platform, build the infrastructure, and then get out of the way. Don't play the game, be the best possible referee.
And the PYQ linkage for this.
Well, 2013 GS3, question 12 on public-private partnership or PPP models, deregulation is the absolute foundation for successful PPP. You can't have a partnership with the private sector if you are strangling them with red tape. A partnership requires trust and ease of doing business.
And for the GS3 economy paper in general.
The entire title of Part 1 of this chapter, which we discussed earlier, was From Import Substitution to Strategic Resilience. That entire journey, that shift in economic philosophy, depends completely on this deregulation agenda. You cannot have resilience if you are bogged down in paperwork. You need agility to compete in the modern world.
We're approaching the hour mark. This has been incredibly dense. Let's try and wrap this up with a conclusion.
We should. Let's summarize the triad one last time for clarity.
Okay, let's do it. Pillar 1, the state.
The state needs to become entrepreneurial. It needs to learn to distinguish between an honest error and outright corruption. It must protect honest, risk-taking officers. And its regulators need to be responsible, respecting the time value of money.
Pillar 2, the private sector.
It has to stop seeking negotiated shelter, stop lobbying for tariffs and protections, start investing seriously in R&D and quality. It must see itself as a partner in nation building by becoming globally competitive and indispensable.
And finally, Pillar 3, the citizen.
We must internalize norms of good behavior. We need to raise our gross domestic behavior. If we follow the rules, pay our taxes, and respect public property, we free up the state's energy to focus on development instead of just policing. We have to co-produce good governance.
The survey ends with a very provocative thought. In a more uncertain world, risk is unavoidable. The advantage lies in managing it better.
That is the final message. We live in a world of geopolitical conflicts, rapid technological disruption, and climate change. We cannot hide from this uncertainty. A state that tries to be perfectly safe will become irrelevant. It has to be capable. It has to be able to navigate the storm, not just hide in the harbor.
So here is a final thought for you, the listener. You are an aspirant. Many of you will become civil servants. You are the future administrator.
And you have to ask yourself this question. Are you ready to be part of an entrepreneurial state? When you get that file on your desk and the decision is risky but potentially great for the country, will you have the courage to sign it? Or will you succumb to that bureaucratic risk aversion we talked about?
That is the question that will define your career and, frankly, the future of this country. Guys, if this incredibly detailed breakdown helped your preparation, please, I'm asking you again, join the membership on YouTube. We go this deep because you need this depth to clear this exam. It keeps the lights on and allows us to keep doing this. We really do appreciate every single member who supports this mission.
And don't forget, the free notes are on Telegram. But if you want the Model Mains answers for the PYQs we discussed today, and trust me, you want to see how we've structured the answer for that non-state actors question using this chapter's insights, join the Legend membership and get on our Discord.
Like this video? Share it with other serious aspirants and drop a comment saying, Vixit Fröd, if you stayed with us till the very end. We want to see who the dedicated ones are.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Jai Hind.